Section 21 of the Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Arabian Nights Entertainments, Volume 2, by Anonymous, translated by Dr. Jonathan Scott, 1754 to 1829. The story of the loves of Kummir Al Zummaun, prince of the Owls of the children of Khaledan, and of Badoura, princess of China, Part 2. In this tower was a well, which served in the daytime for a retreat to a certain fairy named Maimun, daughter of Damirat, king or head of a legion of genies. It was about midnight when Maimun sprung lightly to the mouth of the well to wander about the world after her wonted custom, where her curiosity led her. She was surprised to see a light in the prince's chamber. She entered, and without stopping at the slave who lay at the door, approached the bed. The prince had but half covered his face with the bedclothes, which Maimun lifted up and perceived the finest young man she had ever seen in her rambles through the world. What beauty, or rather what prodigy of beauty, said she within herself, must this youth appear, when the eyes, concealed by such well-formed eyelids, shall be open? What crime can he have committed that a man of his high rank can deserve to be treated thus rigorously? For she had already heard his story, and could hardly believe it. She could not forbear admiring the prince, till at length, having kissed him gently on both cheeks and in the middle of the forehead, without waking him, she laid the bedclothes in the order they were in before, and took her flight into the air. As she was ascending into the middle region, she heard a great flapping of wings, towards which she directed her course, and when she approached, she knew it was a genie who made the noise, but it was one of those that are rebellious against God. As for Maimun, she belonged to that class whom the great Solomon had compelled to acknowledge him. This genie, whose name was Danhash, and son of Shamhurash, knew Maimun and was seized with fear, being sensible how much power she had over him by her submission to the Almighty. He would fain have avoided her, but she was so near him, he must either fight or yield. He therefore broke silence first. "Brave Maimun," said he, in the tone of a suppliant, "swear to me in the name of the great God that you will not hurt me, and I swear also on my part not to do you any harm." "Cursed genie," replied Maimun, "what hurt canst thou do me? I fear thee not, but I will grant thee this favor. I will swear not to do thee any harm. Tell me then, wandering spirit, whence thou comest, what thou hast seen, and what thou hast done this night." "Fair lady," answered Danhash, "you meet me in a good time to hear something very wonderful." Danhash, the genie, rebellious against God, proceeded and said to Maimun, "Since you desire, I will inform you that I have come from the utmost limits of China, which comprise the remotest islands of this hemisphere." "But charming Maimun," said Danhash, who trembled with fear at the sight of this fairy, so that he could hardly speak, "promise me at least you will forgive me, and let me proceed after I have satisfied your request." "Go on, cursed spirit," replied Maimun, "go on and fear nothing. Dost thou think I am as perfidious as thyself, and capable of breaking the solemn oath I have made? Be sure you relate nothing but what is true, or I shall clip thy wings and treat thee as thou deserves." Danhash, a little encouraged by the words of Maimun, said, "My dear lady, I will tell you nothing but what is strictly true, if you will but have the goodness to hear me. The country of China, from whence I come, is one of the largest and most powerful kingdoms of the earth, on which depend the remotest islands of this hemisphere, as I have already told you. The king of this country is at present Gower, who has an only daughter, the finest woman that ever was seen in the world since it has been a world. Neither you nor I, neither your class nor mine, nor all our respective genies, have expressions forcible enough, nor eloquence sufficient to convey an adequate description of her charms. Her hair is brown, and of such length as to trail on the ground, and so thick that when she has fastened it in buckles on her head, it may be fitly compared to one of those fine clusters of grapes, whose fruit is so very large. Her forehead is as smooth as the best polished mirror, and admirably formed. Her eyes are black, sparkling, and full of fire. Her nose is neither too long nor too short, and her mouth small, and of a vermilion color. Her teeth are like 2 rows of pearls, and surpass the finest in whiteness. When she moves her tongue to speak, she utters a sweet and most agreeable voice, and expresses herself in such terms as sufficiently indicate the vivacity of her wit. The whitest alabaster is not fairer than her neck. In a word, by this imperfect sketch you may guess there is no beauty likely to exceed her in the world. Anyone that did not know the king, the father of this incomparable princess, would be apt to imagine from the great respect and kindness he shows her, that he was enamored with her. Never did a lover more for the most beloved mistress than he has been seen to do for her. The most violent jealousy never suggested such measures as his care has led him to adopt to keep her from every one but the man who is to marry her. And that the retreat in which he has resolved to place her may not seem irksome, he has built for her 7 palaces, the most extraordinary and magnificent that ever were known. The first palace is of rock crystal, the second of brass, the third of fine steel, the fourth of another kind of brass, more valuable than the former, and also than steel, the fifth of touchstone, the sixth of silver, and the seventh of massive gold. He has furnished these palaces most sumptuously, each in a manner corresponding to the materials of the structure. He has embellished the gardens with parterres of grass and flowers, intermixed with pieces of water, waterworks, jet d'eau, canals, cascades, and several great groves of trees, where the eye is lost in the perspective, and where the sun never enters, and all differently arranged. King Gower, in a word, has shown that his paternal love has led him to spare no expense. Upon the fame of this incomparable princess's beauty, the most powerful neighboring kings have sent ambassadors to solicit her in marriage. The King of China received them all in the same obliging manner, but as he resolved not to marry his daughter without her consent, and she did not like any of the parties, the ambassadors were forced to return as they came. As to the subject of their embassy, they were perfectly satisfied with the great honors and civilities they had received. Sir, said the princess to the king, her father, you have an inclination to see me married, and think to oblige me by it. But where shall I find such stately palaces and delicious gardens as are furnished me by your majesty? Through your good pleasure I am under no constraint, and have the same honors shown to me as are paid to yourself. These are advantages I cannot expect to find anywhere else, whoever may be my husband. Men love to be masters, and I have no inclination to be commanded. After several other embassies on the same occasion, there arrived one from a king more opulent and powerful than any of the preceding. This prince the King of China recommended to his daughter for her husband, urging many forcible arguments to show how much it would be to her advantage to accept him, but she entreated her father to excuse her compliance for the reasons she had before urged. He pressed her, but instead of consenting, she lost all the respect due to the king her father. Sir, said she in anger, talk to me no more of this or any other match, unless you would have me plunge this dagger in my bosom to deliver myself from your importunities. The king, greatly enraged, said, daughter, you are mad, and I must treat you accordingly. In a word, he had her shut up in a single apartment of one of his palaces, and allowed her only 10 old women to wait upon her and keep her company, the chief of whom had been her nurse. That the kings, his neighbors who had sent embassies to him on her account, might not think any more of her, he dispatched envoys to them severally to let them know how averse his daughter was to marriage, and as he did not doubt but she was really mad, he charged them to make known in every court that if there were any physician that would undertake to cure her, he should, if he succeeded, have her for his pains. Fair Maimoun, continued Danhasch, all that I have told you is true, and I have gone every day regularly to contemplate this incomparable beauty, to whom I would be sorry to do the least harm, notwithstanding my natural inclination to mischief. Come and see her, I conjure you. It would be well worth your while, when you have seen from your own observation that I am no liar. I am persuaded you will think yourself obliged to me for the sight of a princess unequalled in beauty." Instead of answering Danhasch, Mimoun burst out into violent laughter, which lasted for some time, and Danhasch, not knowing what might be the occasion of it, was astonished beyond measure. When she had done laughing, she exclaimed, "Good, good, very good. You would have me then believe all you have told me. I thought you designed to tell me something surprising and extraordinary, and you've been talking all this while of a mad woman. Fie, fie, what would you say, cursed genie, if you had seen the beautiful prince from whom I am just come, and whom I love as he deserves? I am confident you would soon give up the contest, and not pretend to compare your choice with mine." "Agreeable, Mimoun," replied Danhasch. "May I presume to ask who this prince you speak of is?" "No," answered Mimoun. "The same thing has happened to him as to your princess. The king, his father, would have married him against his will, but after much importunity he frankly told him he would have nothing to do with a wife. For this reason he is at this moment imprisoned in an old tower where I reside." "I will not absolutely contradict you," replied Danhasch, "but, my pretty lady, you must give me leave to be of opinion, till I have seen your prince, that no mortal upon earth can equal my princess in beauty." "Hold thy tongue, cursed sprite," replied Mimoun. "I tell thee once more thou art wrong. I will not contend with you," said Danhasch, "but the way to be convinced whether what I say be true or false is to accept of my proposal to go and see my princess, and after that I will go with you to your prince." "There is no need I should be at so much trouble," replied Mimoun. "There is another way to satisfy us both, and that is for you to bring your princess and place her at my prince's bedside. By this means it will be easy for us to compare them together and determine the dispute." Danhasch consented and determined to set out immediately for China, but Mimoun drew him aside and told him she must first show him the tower whither he was to bring the princess. They flew together to the tower, and when Mimoun had strewn it to Danhasch, she cried, "Go fetch your princess, and do it quickly. You will find me here." Danhasch left Mimoun and flew towards China, whence he soon returned with incredible speed, bringing the fair princess along with him asleep. Mimoun received him and introduced him into the chamber of Kummir Al Zummaun, where they placed the princess by the prince's side. When the prince and princess were thus laid together, there arose a sharp contest between the genie and the fairy about the preference of their beauty. They were some time admiring and comparing them without speaking. At length Danhasch said to Mimoun, "You see, and I've already told you, my princess was handsomer than your prince. Now I hope you are convinced." "How convinced?" replied Mimoun. "I'm not convinced, and you must be blind if you cannot see that my prince excels in the comparison. That the princess is fair I do not deny, but if you compare them together without prejudice, you will soon see the difference." "How much soever I may compare them," returned Danhasch, "I shall never change my opinion. I saw at first sight what I now behold, and time will not make me see differently. However, this shall not hinder my yielding to you, charming Mimoun, if you desire it." "What, have you yield to me as a favour? I scorn it," said Mimoun. "I would not receive a favour at the hand of such a wicked genie. I will refer the matter to an umpire, and if you do not consent I shall win by your refusal." Danhasch, who was ready to have shown a different kind of complaisance, no sooner gave his consent than Mimoun stamped with her foot. The earth opened, and out came a hideous, humpbacked, squinting, and lame genie, with 6 horns upon his head and claws on his hands and feet. As soon as he was come out, and the earth had closed, perceiving Mimoun, he threw himself at her feet, and then rising on one knee, inquired her commands. "Rise, Cash," said Mimoun. "I brought you hither to determine a difference between me and this cursed Danhasch. Look on that bed and tell me without partiality who is the handsomer of those two that lie there asleep, the young man or the young lady." Cash looked on the prince and princess with great attention, admiration, and surprise, and after he had considered them a good while, without being able to determine, he turned to Mimoun and said, "Madam, I must confess I should deceive you and betray myself if I pretended to say one was handsomer than the other. The more I examine them, the more clearly it appears to me each possesses, in a sovereign degree, the beauty of which both partake. Neither of them appears to have the least defect, to yield to the other the palm of superiority. But if there be any difference, the best way to determine it is to awaken them one after the other, and to agree that the person who shall express most love for the other by ardor, eagerness, and passion shall be deemed to have in some respect less beauty. This proposal of Kashkash's pleased both Maimun and Danhash. Maimun then changed herself into a flea, and leaping on the prince's neck, stung him so smartly that he awoke and put up his hand to the place. But Maimun skipped away and resumed her pristine form, which, like those of the two genies, was invisible, the better to observe what he would do. In drawing back his hand, the prince chanced to let it fall on that of the Princess of China. He opened his eyes and was exceedingly surprised to find lying by him a lady of the greatest beauty. He raised his head and leaned on his elbow, the better to observe her. Her blooming youth and incomparable beauty fired him in a moment with the flame of which he had never yet been sensible, and from which he had hitherto guarded himself with the greatest attention. Love seized on his heart in the most lively manner, and he exclaimed, "What beauty! What charms! My heart, my soul!" As he spoke, he kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and her mouth with so little caution that he would have awakened her, had she not slept sounder than ordinary through the enchantment of Danhasch. "How," said the prince, "do you not awake at these testimonies of love?" He was going to awake her, but suddenly refrained. "Is not this she," said he, "that the Sultan my father would have had me marry? He was in the wrong not to let me see her sooner. I should not have offended him by my disobedience and passionate language to him in public, and he would have spared himself the confusion which I have occasioned him." The prince began to repent sincerely of the fault he had committed, and was once more on the point of awaking the Princess of China. "It may be," said he, "that the Sultan my father has a mind to surprise me, and has sent this young lady to try if I had really that aversion to marriage which I pretended. Who knows but he has brought her himself, and is hidden behind the hangings to observe me and make me ashamed of my dissimulation? The second fault would be greater than the first. At all events, I will content myself with this ring as a remembrance of her." He then gently drew off a ring which the princess had on her finger, and immediately replaced it with one of his own. After this he fell into a more profound sleep than before, through the enchantment of the genies. Danhasch now transformed himself into a flea in his turn, and bit the princess so rudely on the lip that she awoke, started up, and on opening her eyes was not a little surprised to see a man lying by her side. From surprise she proceeded to admiration, and from admiration to a transport of joy at beholding so beautiful and lovely a youth. "What," cried she, "is it you, the king, my father, has designed me for a husband? Would that I had known it, for then I should not have displeased him, nor been deprived of a husband whom I cannot forbear loving. Wake, then, awake!" End of Section 21.